Good morning and welcome to Teach Me Bees. I'm your host, Dave Wescott, and this morning I have with me special guest Charlotte Wiggins, author of Bee Club Basics and the the Beekeeper Diary, I also have with me my regular co-host, Scott the Beekeeper. Remember, Scott, less is more. Good morning, Charlotte. How are you today?
Good morning, Dave. Good morning, Scott.
Good morning.
As you can tell, we like to joke around and have a good time on the show.
It's going to be fun.
Scott's still reeling from that comment this morning. I'm so excited to have you on the show because it's wonderful to have an author, a beekeeper, a teacher, a mentor of bees with us today. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, hobbies, gardening, why you're passionate about bees?
Sure. So I'm launching my new career as an author. I retired from the federal government. I was a public affairs director for the Forest Service, and I've been gardening ever since I can remember. So I love my garden. It's a 1 acre on a hillside where my neighbors said nothing would grow. And 42 years later, it's a Monarch Way Station, a certified wildlife habitat, and a working apiary. So I've always had that connection with the garden. And according to my uncle, we are Hungarian immigrants, and we used to farm back in Hungary. So I think it's something, that 3 of the 4 of us siblings have some special connection to the garden. And my hobbies involve writing. I'm a reformed journalist, right? So I write 4 blogs. I have a weekly newsletter. I write these books, and I enjoy that. I read a lot, and I'm always learning. I want to learn something new every day if I can. So that's if learning something new is a hobby, that's certainly my hobby.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So you have an active apiary. How many hives are in your apiary? 9 plus 1, I say, because the one plus could be a bunch of nukes or splits, or swarm catches, but I try to maintain 9. Cool. I've had more than that. I've had less than that. 9 seems to be a comfortable number for me.
It's great.
And for our audience, where are you located?
I'm in the mid-Missouri, the belly button of the state, right smack dab in the middle of the country.
Wow. Right in the middle of the country. So my first question is, how do the bees survive the winters?
Well, very much like they survive other places. They're clustered inside the hive, hopefully with enough honey to pull them through winter. We're already getting reports from people that have lost their bees this winter because it was a mild winter. Scott and I were just talking about that. If you think about beekeeping and you're brand new to it, you think that if it's a mild winter, they don't need as much honey. And it's the opposite. The milder the winter, the more the bees are out gallivanting in the garden looking for something to do and consuming the flight fuel, right? The honey that they've collected earlier in the summer. And so by the time January rolls around, we've not had a hard freeze. They haven't been forced to cluster at that 50-degree temperature inside the hive so that they're not flying around. They run out of food and they die. And so the biggest issue we have with our beginning beekeepers around here is getting them to understand mild winters translate into they need more food and they need to have more honey stored.
Well, that's a great tip. That is a fantastic tip. So, and that's one that I have not heard before. So that I really like that. I think that's really great because they are out there active, they're flying, they're using their flight fuel, they're doing all of these things, and they need more honey when it comes to a light winter. Wow, that's really exciting stuff. And so you've written a couple of books and you are working on another one, correct?
Yes. I am. So I'll just tell you real quick. So when I started beekeeping in 2010, there were a ton of beginning beekeeping books out there, but not the practical kind. I make a list. When I go grocery shopping, I take my little list, and there's so much information that you have to absorb as a beginning beekeeper, right? You have to become an amateur biologist, basically. And then you've got to make sure that you're making decisions as you're working with your bees. And so I was looking for a book that I wrote because there's not currently on the market. This is a guide to getting you started. It has a number of checklists that you can follow. It does talk a little bit about, for example, pests and diseases, and it describes what they are, and it tells you how to identify it, what your options are. We don't tell you what to do. We say these are your options for handling varroa, for example, and then how to prevent it if it's something that's preventable. So the book has won 3 international publishing awards. It is self-published, but the Writer's Digest reviewed the book and said it's met all the traditional publishing standards and it has a unique voice. People always comment about the sense of humor in the book. And if you notice, the cover is not your traditional beekeeping cover because it's a whimsical version, right, of the front of a hive. And then this one's a whimsical version of a colony getting themselves organized. Again, both books not available on the market. Kim Flottam, rest his soul, said I was revolutionizing the way beekeeping was taught because I talk about understanding what food your bees are going to access wherever you put your hives. As I said, a lot of bees are dying now because they didn't have enough food for winter, but they also don't have enough food in the summer if you place your hives someplace where they can't access a lot of flowers within a 2-mile radius of the hive. You don't think about this, but this little 1-pound jar of honey is the dehydrated nectar of 2 million flowers.
Holy smokes.
Yeah.
Yep. And if you think about, for example, here in the Midwest, our colonies need between 50 and 80 pounds of honey to get through winter, maybe even a little more as our winters get shorter. That's a lot of flowers. And it's not a little 6-pack that you get from your home and garden center. You need to be planting spring flowering trees and do the native ones because they will adapt to the soil conditions. If you're not a gardener, that's okay. Make sure you're planting native trees because they will be more successful than if you plant something that's exotic.
Right.
That's good advice.
And Bee Club Basics was written at the request of our state beekeeping association, because if you are a beekeeper, yes, you enjoy sitting around a pot of coffee and talking bees, but running a club is a little different. It's kind of like running a business if you're a beekeeper. Yeah. And so I've started 12 nonprofits over the years. And so I went ahead and wrote this and started our own club at the request of our students. And our club is actually using the principles and the checklists and all of that, the monthly calendars that are in this book. And I've heard that there's a half a dozen new clubs getting started around the country using Bee Club Basics as a foundation. And that's what I wanted it to be, right? When you're starting, you don't know how to find your EIN, you don't know where do you find a coffee pot. I mean, the learning curve for running an educational nonprofit is also challenging. So this book is designed to help you with that. And you want both, right? You want the beekeepers starting, but you want them to have a support structure of some sort, and that a club is how you support the beginning beekeepers. So they're connected.
Man, that's awesome. And I would recommend anyone who is interested to pick up these books. Where can they pick up these books?
So they're on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Thrift Books, all of the traditional outlets. But if you want an autographed copy, you can go to my custom gift business. It's called Bluebird Gardens, bluebirdgardens.com, and the books are available there autographed.
Okay.
So you can do what you want autographed, and
we'll put in the show notes. The third book that you're working on, could you give us a little bit of a sneak peek? What is that? What does that look like?
So it'll be the same artist doing these covers because I wanted to do 3 reference books. It's called Bees Need Flowers, and it's called Planting for Pollinators. And it's a guide. It would be the same kind of thing with checklists or whatever to guide people on how to take care of their gardens to support their pollinators. You know this, that the Save the Bee campaign is not about honeybees, although people think that it's about native bees. The native bees are the ones the endangered, not the honeybees. Honeybees have advocates like you and I, but the native bees, not only do they not have advocates, they tend to be solitary, and they tend to be tied to a particular tree, shrub, or flower. The blueberry native bee from New England, is becoming extinct because developments are growing over their unique growing locations for the blueberries. And you can't plant something native around the country. There's some species like eastern redbuds, right? Their zone is through northern United States and part of Canada. But then there are some species that are very, very specific to the microclimate in a particular area, and the bees are dependent on that particular species, the native bees. So the native bees are the ones that are endangered. So planting for pollinators is going to go through how do you take care of your soil, which is the critical part of having healthy plants and have healthy bees. You've seen all these lists, right? Plant these for your bees and this lavender. And those are all wonderful plants, but they're focusing on the wrong side of the plant. They need to be making sure that they've got healthy soil. And how do you do that? Very simple. You compost. We throw 40% of our food out. So instead of throwing it into a landfill, learn to compost. It's very easy to do. If you have a freezer, open up your freezer, and there's usually a drawer that comes out. And I joke about that being your composting drawer.
Right.
Put a plastic bag in there and throw your kitchen scraps in there. And when it fills up, go outside, dig a hole, and throw your scraps in there. And once you start that habit, you will then have more scraps, and then you can make yourself a little composter by taking a 1 to 2 quart or 2 gallon plastic container, put some holes in the bottom, make sure it has a lid on top, stick it somewhere where you don't see it because it's not the most sightly thing, and start putting your kitchen scraps in there, and then throw some of your dead grass clippings or your dead leaves in there, right? 50-50 basically, and some water. It's not complicated. And then if you just make sure that you aerate it a little bit by shoveling more as you put more stuff in, just turn it around, you will have compost, which is that beautiful black gold crumbling organic material that keeps your soil healthy. And then toss that in your flower bed. And so
wow, that's awesome.
That's the most important part of, and as they keep the soil, then keeps the plant healthy. The plant then keeps the bees healthy because the pollen, the nectar they collect, and the food that we eat is healthier. If you have a garden with vegetables, you can do that as well with your vegetable garden, and keep your soil healthy.
That is very cool. That's very cool.
I don't have to write it now.
That's awesome.
You know what? I love pollinating plants. I love gardening. I think that that is so exciting. I'm excited for your book to come out. I'm going to check this out.
When does it come out?
Planting for pollinators.
When are you expecting it to come out?
Hopefully, Pollinator Week, I think, is in June. So I'm going to try to get it out around Pollinator Week.
Okay.
Because people are looking for something to do, they get excited about pollinators. So
June 2024, looking for planning for pollinators. That's exciting. I'm also going to go on to Bluebird Gardeners, and I'm gonna get a couple autographed copies of your book. I'm gonna do it, and I'm excited about it. I'm excited about the checklists. I'm a big believer in checklists, and I'm a big believer in the book Checklist Manifesto. And so, checklists I think are so important. So I'm actually very excited to take a look at, Bee Club Basics and Beekeeper's Diary and really dive into those checklists, because those checklists are game changers, and you think about it, even you think about this flight that we just saw on the news with Alaska Airlines that had the issue where the cell phones got sucked out of the window and they had to make the emergency landing. I don't know if you saw that.
I did.
But that the reason that plane did not go down, and that the reason those people lived, is because they have a checklist for that.
That's good.
They know they have to release pressure in the plane. They have to flip some buttons that each one, the pilot and the co-pilot, each have some things they have to do. And then the flight attendants also have several key things that they have to do, because the pressure changes in the plane can cause that plane to boom, go down. And so those checklists, it's actually the checklists that saved those people's lives and allowed them to land that plane. They don't tell you that in the news. They don't tell you that in what happened. But even with Sully, the movie that you've seen with Tom Hanks, probably, a lot of that was checklist, just going into the checklist and executing it the right way. I love what you said. You're almost have to become an amateur biologist. And one of those things that you can really do, I believe this in any business, whatever you're doing, that checklists are so critical to the success of whatever you're doing, whether it's beekeeping or pollinating or, following the recipe for dinner. It's all about having a checklist that you launch out in front of you. Now, I have a question. You mentioned Varroa.
Mm-hmm.
How are you handling Varroa? Anything unique? Any tips? Any checklists that are anything that you're using around that? Because Varroa is the bee killer, right? So, how are you handling that?
Yeah, it's a challenge. Well, first we have to get the point across that it's not the bugs that are in our hives, our colonies, carry at least 48 viruses. We just, with COVID, we got a sense for what that is as people. But the Varroa damaged the colonies by taking out the bees' immune system. It's called the fat body, and they basically suck the fat body out of the bee. And then the Varroas themselves are the vectors for at least 48 viruses. So those poor bees don't have a chance because they don't have an immune system. So the idea is to minimize the number of Varroa that are in your hive, in your colony, damaging the bees. And there's not much we can do. There's no such thing as Varroa-free colonies right now. But there are a number of things that people can do that I do with my colonies. I do not use chemicals in terms of man-made chemicals. I may do oxalic acid vapor once a year when they're broodless in November. And then during the season, I make sure I split my colonies. Now remember, I'm keeping bees for pollination. I'm not into honey production. So I split my colonies. I make sure my queens are Varroa sensitive, hygienic queens, right? So they lay eggs that produce bees that can recognize the Varroa inside the cells, and they will remove that drone, because the Varroa tend to be in drone brood, and the bees themselves will keep the number of Varroa low. I monitor. The most important thing you can do with Varroa is monitor your hives, whether you use the sugar roll method or the alcohol method. You don't even know if you have a problem if you're not monitoring. And I have people who say, well, I'm just going to go ahead and, treat them with whatever. And I'll say, okay, do that. But how do you know you're being successful? We have chemicals on the market now that Varroa have become sensitized to, and it doesn't work anymore. So you don't want, like antibiotics for us, you don't want to overuse it, because then you become sensitive to that. So I say, don't do that. Just monitor. If you don't have any Varroa in April, great, but you'll probably have more Varroa come June, July, August. So be prepared for what you're going to do at those times of the year. So it's a management process.
Excuse me. Yeah, that's pretty cool. One thing that you kind of touched on there was that some of the man-made treatments don't work as effectively as they do, and to kind of put that in terms for our audience, I don't know if you remember the MRSA, right? People used to go to the hospital, they get MRSA. It eat like a devastating hole in them. They've got to try to fix it. It can cause death, whatever. Like, it's pretty serious. MRSA. I don't know if you've ever heard of this.
I have no idea.
So MRSA. So one of the things that they talked about with MRSA was, people would get on medication, and then when they got on the medication, the MRSA would clear up and they'd get better, but they'd still have a quarter left of their antibiotics, and they wouldn't take it because, I'm feeling better, I'm looking good. And what that didn't completely kill the MRSA, and then it allowed it to mutate and grow and change and become more deadly and more deadly types of ways. So I wonder, is Varroa similar in the fact that when we're using man-made treatments, or we're using treatments that we're not treating all the way? We're not finishing the treatment. We're not finishing the kill, or is it just that they adapt so fast?
Well, it could be both. And it could also be that we are over treating, right? I've had people say, well, if oxalic acid is good in November once, I'm going to do it every month during the season. Well, you're using oxalic acid in November when they're broodless, right? You're trying to knock the phoretic, right? The varroa that are running around the colony out so that your winter bees can pull the colony through winter. You're not getting the varroa that may be inside the cell. You don't have drones, so you shouldn't have any varroa, or you should have few numbers of varroa because the drones, right, they've been kicked out of the colony and they're not growing new ones. And so you have people that overuse it. Sometimes it's the beekeepers who are causing most of the issues because they're overusing. They're not reading the instructions for the chemicals, and so they're overusing it. They want an easy solution. So if oxalic acid is good once a year, let's do it once a month. And the reality with oxalic acid, which is, you're burning oxalic acid into the hive, and that fume is getting to the varroa and killing them off. But it's also damaging the bees' antenna, which is their way of getting around the world. They don't have very good eyesight, but their pheromones dictate, they pick up on the pheromones to their antenna, and the feet, right? They have sensors in their feet, and you're damaging that with oxalic. So you don't want to be doing it throughout the year because you're hurting your bees, and you're doing nothing for varroa during the growing season. So you have to learn the best times to use a particular product. And I know scientists who've told me they believe in have you heard of the dribble method, where you're dribbling oxalic acid on top of the frames?
Yeah, I've heard that referenced. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's the same. So it's a different way to apply the oxalic acid. And when I've asked the scientists about that, it's not that it's better for the bees, it's safer for the beekeeper. Because when you apply oxalic acid vapor, you need to have an N95 mask, you need to have chemical gloves. It's a dangerous situation if you breathe in the oxalic acid. People don't put that stuff on.
Right.
I can just stand downwind and be okay. So the scientific community recommends the dribble method because it's safer for the beekeepers, So that's the other factor that plays into that. We don't read directions, and we don't follow the directions of the products.
That's true. I'm actually guilty of not following directions myself.
No. Yeah, you ever get like a desk or a shelf, from IKEA or something, and It's got directions. You throw out the directions to say, I can build this in 15 minutes, and then it takes you much longer than 15 minutes to actually build it.
I actually have to use the directions on those.
Yeah, you've learned your lesson now.
I mean, I am furniture inept. I mean, it's just not my forte. I wasn't built to put furniture together.
Yeah.
So I gotta go step by step. But
extra screws, right?
That's right.
Right. There's always something.
I thought I only had to have one extra, and now I have 5. Where do the other 4 go? Yeah.
That's what happens. My son is 7 years old. He loves to build Legos. He'll build an entire little package that he gets, and then there'll be like 50 little Lego pieces on the side. And I'm like, what did you miss? What happened here? You missed like an entire thing. Something isn't right. And he's like, no, it's perfect. I'm like, listen, they didn't give you that many extra Legos. Like something is wrong here, so then we got to go back and rebuild it. But no matter where we're at in life, I think following the directions, I think that's really important. That's a great tip. And I think that's a great tip for any new beekeeper who's considering beekeeping as well, because, one, if you're putting in these products, without the proper PPE, personal protective equipment, then you're doing damage to yourself, right? And how that damage affects us could all be different. I don't know that you would drop dead, but I don't know that you might not, depending on how your body reacts to that specific chemical. So following those things is really important. And that'll bring me back kind of to, the Bee Club basics, where, it seems like what an awesome resource for that beginning beekeeper to be able to open that book up and then get some practical real world advice and knowledge, and then follow a checklist. I think that's really, really powerful stuff. As we start getting close to time here, we've just got a couple of questions left. What's one piece of advice you would give to a new beekeeper or someone considering beekeeping today?
Well, I would say know what's growing around your area. If you're going to put hives in your backyard, or you have a farm somewhere, learn what's growing, what's flowering in your area, so that you can, because that's what's going to support your bees. You can do a lot of things for your bees. You can't feed them in a long-term basis. That has to come from nature. And a lot of people don't know what's growing in their backyard. They don't recognize they can identify the trees or the shrubs or the flowers. So take a master gardener course. You don't have to be a master gardener, but that's a really good place. Most extension offices have them. I forget how many master gardeners are around the country, and they're usually clubs. Learn to identify the plants that your bees are going to need. That's really critical. You need to keep your bees healthy, and that comes from the food that they eat.
That is awesome. I love that, because I love plants, and so that's really good. One just kind of curious question that I have is, so you have 9 hives plus 1 there. You're in Missouri. It gets cold in Missouri. My mom is from Missouri, by the way, Blue Springs area.
Okay.
So, that's kind of cool. But regardless of that, let's see. So your bees aren't traveling anywhere. They're not are you keeping your bees inside? Are you keeping them covered in the winter? How are you keeping moisture and cold off of them? Is there any little trick, like for the backyard beekeeper that has, 10 hives or 9 plus 1 or whatever, and they don't want to lose their hives in the winter? What are we doing about cold, moisture? Any little tips or tricks that our keepers can kind of think of?
So just so that you know, I actually have a teaching apiary as well that's tied to the Great Plains Master Beekeeping Program. So we have people come to our club, and they also can come to the teaching apiary and learn techniques, and there are more teaching apiaries springing around the country, because that's where the magic happens, right? That's when you're working with bees and you learn things. And so in terms of moisture versus cold doesn't kill bees, but moisture does. When you have your hive with open sides, or it's deteriorating, and you haven't fixed the area of the hive where rain can get in, moisture is what kills bees. So what I do in my hives, I have a feeding shed that's a 1.5 inch, like an inner cover, that has number 4, I think, hardware cloth on it, so the bees can actually come up when it's warm. And I have sugar cakes I put on there. And the RollaBeeClub.com has the recipe for the sugar cakes, which is sugar, water, a little bit, I think a teaspoon of vinegar to simulate the acidity level that you have in honey. And those sugar cakes at the top wick moisture out of the hive if they have it. And they also provide additional food for the bees as they're moving up the hive through the winter, right? The colony's working its way through the honey that they've stored. They hit that top and they run out of honey, and they die because they won't go sideways unless it's really warm outside. They keep clustered in the center. And so if they go up the top and they hit that sugar cake, they don't die, right? They have this supplemental food source that gets them through winter. So I recommend sugar cakes. You hear the Mountain Camp emergency feeding way. The gentleman was his email slug was Mountain Camp, which where the name comes from. But he talked about putting just a newspaper and a pile of sugar on top of the newspaper with some little cuts in the newspaper so the bees could come up. That's the same concept. And that sugar will also absorb moisture. If you can't make the sugar cakes, you need to do it very quickly. But my biggest hint for beginning beekeepers is leave extra honey on. When do we collect the honey? We extract it usually right July, August, when it's really hot. So the honey's easier to manage. But I tend to leave my honey on all winter. And then in the springtime, as they're bringing in new nectar and making new honey, then I will take those frames out and then I will wait until it's warm enough that I can actually extract it. I leave extra honey on. Other people will take the honey out and then they will try to supplement, feed them through the winter with either syrup or sugar. The best food for the bees is the honey. It has enzymes in there that they have collected. They have amino, anyway, they've got things that are healthy for them. There's nothing that we can do that will even come close to the honey and the healthiness of honey. So leave them the honey.
Yeah, that is fantastic.
That's awesome.
I love that tip. Scott, any final thoughts or questions as we bring this in for a landing?
Yeah, it's been a really good interview so far. And, I'm curious, you started a bee club, bee association. Before we started recording, you mentioned there's 8 states that are working together in the Midwest on bee training and educating people. Could you maybe share with the audience a little bit about that and the mentorship side of things with training new beekeepers and the educational side? Could you speak to maybe your experience and what that's like and any thoughts you have towards that?
So when I started beekeeping, I didn't go to a class. I read a lot of books and thought I had a mentor that was going to help me, and that fell through. And the reality today is there are not that many mentors out there to help people. So we use the Bee Buddy system here. If you're going to our class, we try to match you up with somebody else who's starting so that you can share information and learn from each other. The Great Plains Master Beekeeping Program is providing beginning beekeeping information to beginning beekeepers. We recommend that you take a beginning course. You can do it online. You can do it in person. You can then give volunteer hours and field hours as part of that program. And then when you're ready, you take an exam, you get a field test, and you move on to the journeyman level. The Great Plains Master Beekeeping Program is teaching teachers. We're not a bee school, but we want to get people so we can get mentors out there. We can get instructors out there teaching scientifically based best management practices. When you're starting, you don't know what you don't know. And so it's easy to get involved in YouTube videos that may or may not be appropriate for your area. There are lots of great beginning books, but they may not be the kinds of things that you need to use for your practices in your area. So we're trying to build mentors through that. And that program also helps people who are in the Heroes to Hives program, the national program that teaches military, active duty veterans, and immediate family members. That program has 14,000 students that have gone through the program, and they're launching their program for 2024. They recommend you go through 1 year of education. It's online. They also have teaching apiaries like we do. And then you get your bees your second year. Well, when you get your bees your second year, what happens? The program ends. Well, they're funneling their students into the Great Plains Master Beekeeping Program. So we're supporting each other as a partnership with those two programs. We have the Great Plains Master Beekeeping teaching apiaries in 8 states in the Midwest. And the whole idea is to partner with each other and support each other, very much like you would if you had a bee club, right? It's just kind of a big, giant 8-state bee club versus, one that you have in your local area.
That's awesome.
That is awesome. That is really great stuff. So we're bringing this in for a landing. It's been really fantastic having you on the show. Any final thoughts that you would leave with our audience here, Charlotte?
Well, not everybody has to be a beekeeper. And a lot of people who go through our classes will come up and say, I've thought about it. I don't have the time, or I'm still afraid and I really don't want to get involved. And I'll say that's success, because you've realized how much time, the expense. Beekeeping is expensive to get started. So, but there are other things people can do if they want to help bees, right? You want to plant native on your property, trees, shrubs, and flowers. There are programs out there, the Xerces Society, the Pollinator Partnership Program. Missouri has the Missouri Pollinator Steward Program, where you can educate yourself about the plight of pollinators and their role in our food chain, right? 40%, one out of every 3 bites of healthy food we eat are courtesy of pollinators. So you can support them without keeping bees. And I would recommend that you do that. Maybe start with buying yourself a little native bee house and finding out what trees are working, are in your yard, and just educate yourself about pollinators. You don't have to keep bees.
That is fantastic advice.
Good word.
This has been a terrific show. And I just want to say, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, what is the best way for them to reach you?
So I have a website, an author website, CharlotteEkkerWiggins.com, and there's a contact form there. They can also reach me through bluebirdgardens.com, which is my custom gift business. And I'm online, so I'm on TikTok, the usual Instagram, Facebook.
Yep.
So you can reach me that way as well.
Awesome. Well, I know what I'm doing next. I'm going to the Bluebird Gardens and I'm getting a couple autographed copies of your book, and I'm going to check out these checklists. I'm super excited. This has been a fantastic show. If you're looking to take your beekeeping skills to the next level, check out the books Bee Club Basics and A Beekeeper's Diary. This has been fantastic. I'm Dave Wescott. Follow me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, anywhere where it's social. If you enjoyed our show, give us a like, give us a share. Tune in every Thursday because we are having fun talking Teach Me Bees, and we just have a fantastic time. And it's always good to see my favorite co-host, Scott the Beekeeper. Any final words? Close us out, Scott.
It's good to be here. Thank you guys for listening. Pick up some books. Yeah, love it.
There you go.
See you later.
Charlotte, thank you. It was awesome spending time with you.
My pleasure.